making me laugh.
I just feel a little casual in a t-shirt. I feel like maybe I should dress up a little.
No, I do require clothing though.
We are talking about romance novels.
Yes. Well, there's romance and there's romance.
Hi, this is Eric Elder, and I'm so glad you're joining us for this edition of Eric Elder and Friends. And I have a great friend with me, Mary FELKINS, and she's been a friend for many, many years.
Right.
Way back when our kids were even maybe just prior to birth or almost to be
You
born.
had Karis. We just looked at her and thought, well, one day that would be really fun. We didn't have any kids.
And my daughter's in her late 20s now, so that was a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
I worked with her husband, and we got together and we would talk about the Bible, we'd talk about life, we'd talk about marriage, and it was just a lot of fun to hang out with the FELKINS.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, I got exposed to Mary's writing ability, really through her Christmas letters. She would send some great Christmas letters with little nuggets of wisdom and truth and humor about her family and their adventures for the year. And it was always one of the highlights of reading through Christmas letters to look forward to Mary's Christmas letters. And then somehow she turned it into a next step in her life recently. And so I want to talk about that and just how she stepped out in faith, how you can step out in faith, whether it's writing or music or art or whatever you might want to do, so that you can really use the gifts that God has given you. And so I have a few questions for Mary just about how she took that step of faith, what's happened since then, and just sort of her experience there to encourage you. I'm sure there will be some obstacles she'll share too, but to encourage you overall to step into the things that God is calling you to do.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great. And I just finished reading your book, your first novel, your debut romance novel called Call to Love. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I don't say that just because I'm your friend, but I enjoyed it because you gave this great story, a grand sweeping story of love and romance set in some environments that were interesting to me. There's the police aspect of it. What's it like to be in that police line of work and then to love someone whose life is always on the line, and then also in some difficult life circumstances, unexpected pregnancies and difficult things. You didn't shy away from any of that, but you also gave a godly perspective without really slamming people over the head with God. And I just loved it because you have a Christian worldview, but it's not necessarily a blatant or overtly Christian book. It's just it's a great story with a lot of touching elements. So I really enjoyed it, and I marked many lines that I thought you just had super ways of saying things and introducing things, and I love your phrasing.
Well, I appreciate that. And actually, when I think about what my desire is when I'm writing is not to be overly religious, and I do shy away from saying that I'm a Christian author. I started to do that, and it didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right. And I wrestled with it and realized that people, unfortunately, have those preconceived ideas that it's going to be very preachy. It's going to be very legalistic. Or in romance, that it will be so clean that they won't even hold hands. So it's interesting to hear from the reader what your perspective, your takeaway was, and that you were able to capture that. So
well, it's interesting that you wrestled and you came to that conclusion, and that's definitely what I got out of it. I really felt I felt anyone would feel welcomed into the book. They wouldn't be put off by it, and they would get some good morals along the way that are not stuffy and stilted, but helpful to walk through these situations. I just sent you a list of quotes too from the towards the end of the book. I've been sending them to you as I've been reading it that I really like. But I just like that you. There's a quote about what good is it to have a ring without a heart to go with it? You said it much better than that. But just it's there are questions people wrestle with and they wonder about, and without giving some Bible verse, you addressed it, I thought, very tactfully and helpfully to people. But you weren't interested necessarily in writing romance novels when I met you 30 years ago. What happened that made you want to step out into this realm?
I don't know that I would say I wasn't interested. It wasn't even on my mind at all. My
Okay,
4 kids, I only have 4. You had 6.
I have 6.
Um,
Yeah, that's
all the
4.
homeschool.
It's a lot of kids.
Yeah, well, 1 is a lot, depending on how that turns out. But honestly, my story is very unconventional. And Bruce and I have talked about this. It went back to 2012. And it was at a conversation we were having about our financial situation at the time, which was pretty dismal. And we were wrestling with, well, what can we do? What can we do? And, what can we sell? And I literally, literally said, okay, I'll write a book. I
Wow.
mean, that's absurd, because how is that going to pay the bills? How's that going to pay the mortgage? That's not the answer you give your husband who's struggling.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm going to be an author. Let's do that. That'll
Yeah, right,
bring
right,
in income.
exactly. So, but then I had a friend who very soon after that, she confirmed, she said, who do you think gave you that phrase to begin? Who do you think put that idea in your heart and your mind to say in the first place? And soon after that, God really affirmed that was from him, because he gave me a vision. It was like this big old vat full of words and phrases and sentences and paragraphs, and he reaches his hand inside this barrel, and up out of the barrel he's holding this book, a book. And he
Hmm.
says, in that barrel is your contribution. It's a story idea that you have in your head that I really never didn't know what I was going to do with that. It was just kind of meant to stay in my own little brain. But he said, from that, this is going to be what I'm going to use. This is going to be the final product. So I was really thankful that I wasn't left with just this, I'm going to write a book, without any confirmation, that he really was directing me. Sometimes you'll hear that someone will say, God called me to do that. So I can say that now that he called me. It just happened a little different, where I said it first and then he confirmed it. So then it was, well, I don't know how to write a book.
Hmm.
So the following May, 2013 is when I went to my first conference, and I had this really large, ridiculous, poorly crafted 200,000 word story, which is just
Gosh, you don't written it?
right. Yeah, and he protected me in that nobody asked for it at all the appointments I went to, but I had confirmation that I do like romance, meaning happily ever after ending between hero and heroine. That's really what that means. And I didn't know one genre from another.
So
So
this was news to you, that there was a genre like this and what the definition was. You didn't know that.
no, and in fact, the way I wrote it the first time, it doesn't turn out so well for the hero. And I really felt strongly about that. And I liked a lot of elements about that. It's very emotional. But I just was getting resistance. Even from a law enforcement officer that I had read over a scene, he kind of stopped and he said, wait, does he die?
Hmm.
Like, that can't happen. Just there was just this hesitation. And I thought, in my own life and just the way God's fashioned me, I want to know it's going to be okay in the end. In parenting and marriage, so that's where I realized that's actually a category. It's called romance, and that's the lane that I feel like I feel called to stay.
Well, you're
And
the first person that defined that for me. I didn't realize that romance meant happily ever after.
yeah, when you pick that up, when I pick up a romance book, the author has made a promise to me that it's going to be okay.
Hmm.
Hero and heroine will walk off in the sunset together.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, it's literally, and again, people will get uncomfortable just even with the term romance and think, oh yeah, yeah, like no, that's not. I mean, and there is some romance that turns out okay in the end. It's not something I would recommend, but so therein lies the word inspirational romance, in that it's points to the Lord, or that's my attempt, but it's going to be okay.
Hmm. So it's specifically inspirational romance. It's going to
Mhm.
give you something that points to
Mhm.
somehow.
And that's code for Christian.
Okay. Okay. Because
Yeah.
inspirational is a people like inspiration, whether they're religious or not.
Mhm. Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Well, I was just talking to a friend who's a ballerina. She's done
Mhm.
professional dance for a long time, and uh, she wore this tutu in a dress in a show that was just beautiful. It was called a romantic tutu, so it was more flowing. I said, "Do you still call
Right.
it a tutu? Because it's just beautiful." And she was playing this tragic character who, terrible things were happening to her, but it was romantically tragic.
Right.
I was just saying, I really like the romanticized tragedy so much better than real tragedy
Exactly.
because I can look at it and it's just beautiful and sweet. And so that's interesting that the word romantic or romance sort of implies there's a certain euphoria about it or a pleasantness, even in the midst of hard stuff. So
Mhm.
I'd never thought of that before. So
Right. Right.
thanks. So that's how you picked the genre. It was something within you that you wanted to come out.
Mhm.
You finished your first book now. This is amazing. I mean, so this is 2012. You had this inspiration, this thought. 2013, you went to a writers' conference, and
Mhm.
you've finished an entire book, and it's now out in the public domain, and people are reading it and reviewing it on Amazon.
Mhm.
How does
Mhm.
that feel? What does that feel like to you?
I
And you
I
don't have to romanticize it, but
Yeah, well, it's gratifying when I think about from there to now. You can pick it up and go, "Oh yeah, I wrote a book," but the Lord is good to say, "Let's review." Because I didn't get a contract since I was choosing traditional publishing route as opposed to indie publishing, which felt very frightening, and I felt very insecure about that, doing anything on my own. I pursued a contract with a publishing house, and I got an offer in October of 2015, and this was after a conference in May. Again, I went to another conference in May of 2015, and I submitted information to different people that had asked for it, and so October. So from the 2015 to 2019 when it released, that's, do the math. That's a long time
Hmm.
because you're standing in line behind other people that are already in the queue, and you've got to go through the process of editing and haggling back and forth about whether or not you want to change this, or you're grateful that they found things that were written either informationally incorrect or the timing issues, or there are aspects to it that I was not willing to change and had strong reasons why. And as long as I could validate that, justify that, then so it's gratifying to be done. I just need to remember what it takes, what it can take to get there if you are wanting to produce a quality product, because your name's associated with it, and then Jesus's name is associated with your name. So what we put out there, I mean, I could publish something today, but I want it to be quality. So
Like your 200,000 word first draft, but thank God you had some
yes.
breaks and some wisdom and some editing, and
Mm-hmm.
I can see all that process. So it's like a lot of work, though. I mean, this wasn't this, you know.
Yeah.
So you don't just go, "Hey, I want to write a book. I wrote a book. Oh, it feels so great." There's a
Mm.
lot in the middle of that.
And
Um,
there are, yeah, and I think there are people that can become very impatient with that, and they will publish, and they can, as you know, and do very, very well. It's not that hard to publish something when you go through the mechanics of it. And in fact, there's a lot of poorly written material that appeals to the sin nature that gets, published and gets a lot of reviews, and I'm just not willing to go there. So,
hmm.
um,
Uh, Let me ask about your I would say inborn ability to write or to tell a story. Even in your Christmas letters, you could in two sentences tell a story with
mhm.
a beginning, an end, and a punchline. You had a certain storytelling craft. Had you recognized that at least throughout your life? I mean, if you look back, do you see a writing thread or a storytelling thread, or have
Mhm.
you written other things, different articles? I don't know really your history
Mhm.
between from Christmas letters that I've read to your book that I've read. Has writing actually been there and maybe just dormant, or
Exactly.
was a whole new left turn and
I believe it's been there and dormant. I think that's very well said. I did write little stories as a child. I do have them in a box in the closet, the storage closet, and they're very precious, but they're horrible. It was really my way, I think, of having imaginary friends. I'm the youngest of six. I mean, I can psychoanalyze it, but it was just kind of like painting or scrapbooking. I would write these little books. And then I had a friend in junior high she's published with HarperCollins. She and I were talking in junior high and realized that we were each scribbling stories in a spiral notebook. Well, she had dreams of being an author long, long, long ago. You know, as a child, I was just doing it for fun.
Hmm.
And then I went to school, to university, with a nutrition degree. And then I pursued a master's in nutrition. So I didn't have writing on my radar, but I did a lot of writing as a dietitian. 12-week weight management program, The Right Way, WEIGH. I mean, just the creative aspect, or healthy expectations for pregnancy care center in Houston. I mean, so I feel like it was all kind of percolating in there.
Hmm.
But I just think God in his kindness didn't give me this wrestling of, I've got to raise kids, but I really want to be an author. I just think he, in the right time, kind of unleashed
Hmm.
that. So yeah, and then when I finally said, "Hey, I'm writing a book," my oldest sister Margaret texted in response, and she said, "It's about time."
Wow.
And that
Wow.
both that really stilled me, because I thought, have I been ignoring something? What does that mean?
Hmm.
It was just really a call to action.
Let me switch to the viewer then, the person that's watching this, because maybe there are things in their life where maybe other people have said or recognized in you,
Mhm.
and maybe it's lying dormant. Maybe it hasn't been unleashed, as Mary said, and maybe it's worth paying attention to that, whether it's
Mhm.
writing music or painting or going into accounting, or there's so many different things that you might be wired for.
Mhm.
And pay attention to what other people are saying. I think if you ask God and say, God, are there some other things I should be doing? Am I using the gifts and talents you put in me or not? And if
Mhm.
you're really open to saying, God, okay, let me take a careful analysis of not even what you do professionally, but what do I like to do?
Right.
What brings you joy? I mean,
Mhm.
is there anything else you would say about that? I mean, had you had other people comment? You did say about like your friend when you were young, or was it more? It was more just after you said, I'm going to do this, then people were like, oh,
Mhm.
that totally
Mhm.
makes sense. Mary Felkins is a writer.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it is a little challenging. I'm not sure what the word is to say. I have this. I don't have a degree in journalism. I
Mm,
don't have a degree in communications or English lit. I have another older sister who, on two occasions, had the audacity to interrupt my TV time.
mm,
And I was watching Donny Osmond and Carol Burnett, and I mean, all these stories just coming out of the screen without any effort on my part. And she said, don't come out of your room until you've read two chapters. Okay, that is not the profile of an author. And so God uses little people like David to kill giants, and uh, so
so you're disclaiming this isn't exactly your lifetime calling. There are other things you'd rather do than write, but you are gifted, and you do have a way of telling a story, and you have a way of putting together words and sentences. And
mhm.
there were so many just nuggets in the book that I'm like, wow, that is good. Love.
So,
A
so a
baby.
lot of that, I mean, I'm inspired by other writers as well. I think part of my job, well, I know for a fact, part of my job is to be reading other authors.
Mm,
And I do, and I read slowly, and I'm pondering and I'm thinking about, wow, like what the feedback you're giving me. I do that as well with other authors that are writing in the same genre. I don't have a lot of time or energy to read just anything I want. So I really try to stick with authors I admire who are writing in the same genre. And I'm trying to just get lost in the story, but I'm typically kind of mentally taking notes. It might be one verb that I thought I have never even thought about, that is being a very strong way to describe the action
mm,
of a character.
mm.
So,
So you talked about going to writers' conferences and reading other books. So you've really jumped into this heart and soul and like
Yes.
I don't know how you describe it, full time or
Yes.
whatever. And
Yes. Yes.
you've now taken it into the realm of you're going to research this. I'm going to research. I'm going to figure out because you want to hone your craft. You want to make
Yes.
this skill really good. And I think that's incredible. And that takes a lot of courage because am I really a writer? Because you hadn't even published a book until this year,
Right.
but you spent several years just investing.
Hmm.
Describe some of that investment. You talked about the conferences. What else? What other kinds of sacrifices have you had to make too, or what kind of time commitments are you doing to this to really build your craft?
Well, I mean, it is a full-time job, and I make reference to my writer's cave, which is where I am now. I'll give you an example. My daughter Caroline wants me to pick her up tomorrow from college a little bit earlier than we originally anticipated for spring break. And I have to work. I'm not getting a paycheck. She
Hmm.
said, but Mom, what do you mean? What are you doing? I said, I have to work. And so she understands now that I have a commitment to, as we say, backside in chair, hands on keyboard, tapping away madly. It's kind of a common phrase. So after I have some good steady time in the morning with the Lord, and I feel like I'm fueled spiritually and have the right um, frame of mind, I mean, I have a planner where I commit to writing projects, primarily a manuscript, devotion that I write on Fridays, or whatever other articles I might be submitting. Do have some other writing commitments and a writer's site that I host. I'm one of 5 hosts for a writer's blog called Seriously Write, and so I have to take material and that is submitted and do that. So I have to learn to manage and commit my time, and there are times when I might be cleaning the house or sweeping, and the Lord will say, "That's really not what you need to be doing."
Mm.
That's all fine and well, but you are supposed to be sitting down and making forward progress on something. Um,
Mary, I'm so impressed. I mean, you block out big chunks of time, like your day,
mhm.
and you say, "I am a writer, and I'm going to write."
Yeah.
But you don't have someone looking over your shoulder. No,
Mhm.
you don't have a boss telling you to do this. You don't have a paycheck that's depending on it. You don't, not yet. Or,
It's just, I mean, and I don't do it flawlessly, but I know that I have to really treat it like a job. And that's why I get up and go to the gym early in the morning when I would rather, drink turpentine. But I have to get home, I have to take a shower and go to work and get it over with.
and I mentioned your humor, but you just have a funny way of saying things. I'd rather drink turpentine than go to the gym.
I actually almost did as a child, so
So this is not funny. This is just normal life for you. Uh,
but I do, we teach our friends and family how available we are by how we respond. My kids know that they can text their daddy any hour of the night, or anytime during the day, and if he's available, he will respond. And for me, I have one sibling she's a CPA and a lawyer. You're not going to text her in the middle of the day. You're not going to hear from her until at night. Why? She's working.
mm,
So I make exception for, of course, my husband and my kids if they have need for me. But otherwise, I can't just, yeah, let's go meet for lunch. Or sure, I have time, but I have to commit that to what God has called me to do and not be frustrated by the end of the night that I haven't gotten things done if I haven't used my time responsibly. So,
that's that's incredible. That's a lot of discipline, and I think homeschooling can help you find. I mean, can make a difference there too, because you can fall into the trap easily of, oh, I'm just home with my kids. Sure, I can run out and pick you up. I can go to the airport. I
yeah.
can do. You can do anything
Hmm.
because you don't have anyone else telling you that you've got to do this. But
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
you believe what you're doing is serious and is called by God, and
Hmm.
you just make time for it.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
impressed. Did someone show you that or teach you that, or did you just decide I've got to do it this way, or is this the way you're wired?
I'm not necessarily wired that way. I prefer to kind of just float along, and I tend to I can get distracted easily. Being on Instagram, social media is a little bit like cocaine sometimes, and I feel like the Lord says, turn your phone upside down, ignore a new notification. So it is a discipline, and I do have to fight against that. So I might come across as disciplined, but I have to work at it because I know the tendency is to float away, troll the internet, or I'll start to research something. Okay, well, what would this equipment be for this character? I'm writing about an NFL defensive end right now. What do I know about that? Nothing, except they have a football that they throw and one team tries to win. So I'm like, well, what is the name of this kind of gear? Well, then 20 minutes later, I'll be on another, I wander. So I have to be really careful. I have to stay off of Facebook until later in the day, or I'll have certain days when I might schedule to post social media, maybe a quote from the book or something that I've created on Canva. Okay, Wednesday at 4:00, set your phone alarm so it reminds you, okay, post that thing, and then get back to work. So
that's great. And I'm going to interview a little more on another episode of Online Christian Writers Group that I really want to dive into some of your writing practices and ways that you how you decide what you include in stories and things. So I want to talk about your writing, but I want to talk right now about your next projects. What's on tap next, and how did writing this first book, well, really your second book because you had the 200,000 word version, but how did publishing this first book sort of prime the pump for what you've been doing since? And you've talked about a few things. Maybe you could talk about those other projects and sort of how has this fed that, or have the other things fed this? I don't know.
I think it feels, the reality is the reality that the book is here. God published it, and this is what I'm going to do until and if He should call me away from it. So it's a matter of continuing to work on projects, but also realizing there's still so much to learn. I mean, I would change a lot of things in the first book with what I know now that I didn't know then. And whatever, if I published something today, in 3 years, I probably look back and go, ooh, I would change that. So you only know what you know. And that goes back to also reading other people's work and studying sentence structure. And so going to conferences, if funds are limited, but that truly is a great way to fellowship and connect with other people in the industry. I think that's, as much as we can afford to do that, I think that's important. I do have an online group that I've been a part of. One of the biggest influences has been a group called My Book Therapy that Susie May Warren and Rachel Hauk both started. I don't know how long ago. It's probably well over 10 years ago. And there's teaching, there's inspiration for an hour once a week, and just learning from what they've done that's worked and what doesn't work. And then also subscribing to writers' blogs, and there's thousands and thousands of them. But if you kind of figure out which ones most people tend to lean toward, then you can be more selective. That's part of my day too, going through email and taking the time to fill my head with the learning so I can then go back and put it into practice or apply it.
Well, there are lots of ways to develop your craft, whether it's conferences, blogs, other people in your profession, your skill sets. So I'm trying to apply this to the viewer that maybe isn't a writer, but there are lots of different ways you can grow and grow your skill. And you wrapped up your writing of this book probably a year ago or more before it was published. Is that right? I can't remember, but so you've already been on to other projects. While this was in the publishing pipeline, you started another one. You started, I remember I don't know how many you're on to, but
yeah, there actually is a second book that Bruce it's finished. And it was in the care of an agent. It's called Steel Rose. It's still inspirational romance. Syrian ballerina comes to America to rebuild her life and discovers that she might lose everything all over again. And it was in the care of an agent for a couple years, and he was unable to find a publishing house for it. So when you get a no, you don't know, is that your marketing is weak, the story is not something they can sell, your writing is not appealing, you don't have enough followers on social media, you have no idea. No is a no. It's kind of like you propose to someone, they say no and walk away. You're like, well, can you tell me, is it my hair? Is it what is it? And so I don't really know what to do with that, but I'm convinced that something is not quite right with it. So I have since gone on to, and have been working on for a couple, what I thought was a standalone has become a 3-part series
Mm.
about an abandoned plantation house that restores its owner. So we've got an older sister in book 1, younger sister book 2, and then the third is the half sister that neither of them knew about.
Mm.
And that's inspired by this. I don't know if you can see, this is a plantation house,
Yeah.
1846 plantation house in Napoleonville, Louisiana. And I'm inspired by objects. So like the horse, the white horse on the cover of the book, that's a thing. And that inspires me when I write. Steel Rose was inspired by a rose that my daughter's boyfriend at the time welded for her when she as a gift for her 18th birthday.
Mm.
Then when they broke up and she didn't want it anymore, I said, "Oh no! I feel story. There's a story in there somewhere." So that's one thing I do know, that writers write, and there are some writers that have plenty of manuscripts, and it's not till they get to the 10th one that might be something that is either worth publishing on their own, or that a traditional publishing house wants to pick up. Or you might present one and they may say, do you have anything else?
Huh.
And you should at least have ideas. So you're just always working. You're always moving forward. Novellas, which are books that are in the 40 to 60,000 word category. Those are really, really popular. People like to read those in a couple days, and you can have something like that. I have a draft of one actually that's I haven't looked at in a couple summers, but it's kind of an introduction to this 3-part series. There's just so you're just always writing. There's always ideas noodling.
Interesting. And it's good to know that you don't always strike oil the first time you dig.
Yeah.
But it doesn't keep you from digging, because you had a call from God, and other people, whether they have a clear call like that, or they have or in hindsight you see it even more.
Yes, exactly.
Whether you even felt that, but sometimes it just takes a lot of persistence, and
Mhm.
especially in writing, or in even in art, there's plenty of painters that didn't find their millions while they were alive. They didn't find their audience until some other
Interesting.
time.
Right.
J.K. Rowling talks about this, and just how
Mhm.
many publishers rejected her first Harry Potter book because it
Mhm.
wasn't their thing, or it wasn't a genre. It wasn't it just didn't
Mhm.
resonate with them. But once she found her audience, things
Mhm.
explode. And I think the same for me. Of course, I'm in the self-publishing world, and so
Right.
I've published 25 books in 25 years, and
That's
they don't all reach the same audience. But
right.
I have written a lot, and I just keep writing, and I keep putting it out there, and then
Exactly.
sometimes one book will reach somebody, and one book will reach somebody else. I had a pastor at our church. We have a number of pastors, but one of them just absolutely loved one of my books and recommended it to his classes and his students and everyone. And then he just totally did not like the next one. It was a different genre, different feel, different everything. And he was just like, Eric, I cannot recommend this to anyone. And you know,
Mm.
other people absolutely love that book. So
Mm.
you
Yes.
know what your reader's going to like. And, I'm probably not your target audience for romance novels, but I really enjoyed your book. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, it's part of it's just finding. I'm going to say your audience, but that applies whether you're
Right.
writing or performing or accounting,
And
whatever you're doing.
I just really think, we do have to say kind of who our audience is. So just to be specific, I would say maybe women aged 18 to 65. But who am I to really say? I mean, you do that just for, say, a proposal. If you're writing a proposal, they want to know who's your target audience. And I just feel like, I feel the Lord just smiling, like you have no idea
Mm.
who and where needs to hear this story. It's enough that my daughter Alexandra, who just turned 24, has read the story and got a little weepy at a mother-daughter scene.
Wow.
The day is done. My work
Wow.
is, it's so yeah, I just think I wasn't writing it for her. I was like, the other three haven't read it. They're like, way to go, Mom. They're cheering for me, but they're not going to read it. Bruce says he's read it. He hasn't read it. It's okay. It's okay.
Your husband.
Like, where's the spy novel? I need a spy novel. I mean, he read an early manuscript, so he thinks he's read it, but he hasn't read the final. So I really have to leave that. That's a supernatural thing that I may not hear about. And I feel like too, we have a tendency to be a little puffed up if we get too much feedback that's positive. And it's really good to say, you might be hearing all kinds of positive reviews, but they may not reach your ears. I may not allow you to know all that. You have to just let me carry it where I'm going to carry it and touch the heart of whoever's going to be touched. And some people just, they'll say they love it, and you may hear it or you may not. So, but
Mary, what would you say to the viewer, listener who is just sort of not sure if they should step out in faith or not? They've got an idea of something in their mind, but they're just hesitant and they're just wondering. And what would you say to them?
Well, it is a scary industry. Fear is a very big part, a lot of writer insecurity, a lot of competition. It's a very noisy world. So I think for me, if God has called you to something, whatever that something is, and we'll say it's writing, then that's an issue of obedience. So if it were the other way for me, where God said, I want you to write a book, then I would have had to respond. So if somebody feels called, I've had people come up to me and say, I really have something I want to write. I feel like I should, but they're hesitant. So God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. I believe that's Romans 11:29. I have the Bible here. But so in that case, it's really a matter of, are you going to be obedient to it or not? He's already gone ahead. He's already got the finished product in his hand. He already knows who needs to read it, or what one person, and you got to be okay with that, what one person or whatever audience needs to hear that, the message. It might be a personal story of your own life. It can be fiction. There's a lot of ways to share truth. So I would just challenge somebody to realize that you're stepping into a very scary industry. God's already gone ahead, and he will, like in my situation, he will equip. If he's called me to do it, he will equip me to do it. Where I am weak and where I don't know things, he will bring people and conferences or whatever it is to honor my willingness to step out into that world. And rejection, it's everywhere, but it's really it's hard. It's hard in this environment, and you got to have a thick skin. And for me, if I have a rejection, I'm learning to see that as God's protection. The door is closed, but I want to keep knocking on it, but the door is closed. And there's something on the other side, either a publishing house or individual within that organization, that maybe would not be a healthy situation, and I may not know why, but so you just have to just kind of swallow that and keep at it.
Well, I admire your determination and your resolve, and I think it's going to pay off, maybe even with your financial blessing. I'm really praying and hoping and believing, because of your super commitment to it, that it will do on that end back for you what you're doing for other people, because you're giving to a lot of people through this dedication, through this writing, and I just know the Lord honors that. I know he honors that when your heart is there and you're wanting to do it for him and you're wanting to help other people. I think you probably can't go wrong with that.
I hope not.
Well, I would love also to have you pray for the people that are watching this, listening to this, if you're comfortable with that. But before that, I just want to ask you, how can people connect with you, and how could they get your first book, and how can they get on your mailing list for your devotionals and things like that? Because I'd love for people to connect with Mary Felkins. Okay,
well, I appreciate that. Yeah, the website is probably one of the easiest ways to connect. www.maryfelkins.com. there is a place to subscribe, and I do write a quarterly author newsletter. I don't want to do it more than that because there's not a whole lot more to share, and I don't want to flood people's inbox more than that. But there are buy links to acquire the book on the website where they could.
Called Call to Love by Mary FELKINS.
Mm-hmm. And it's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. The publisher has the hardback, and then I have some here at home. But it's mostly in digital format, and then there's also the audio format as well that's available.
Oh, that came out. Great. I didn't know that was out.
It's on Audible. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And you write a devotional as well. Is it also from maryfelkins.com? Is that a different sign up?
No, that's the same. There's just one sign up, so one way to subscribe. So.
Okay. Terrific. Well, if you would, anything else you want to share before we wrap up and pray? I mean,
I just would challenge people, if they are feeling called or have something that they need to share, a story. I always imagine what people behind them will want to know, to go ahead and write it anyway. If people are looking at the whole industry of writing and the whole scariness of that, and that just to put that aside. And my son Anthony actually is reading at 26 this silly little journal that I kept in 1999 that cataloged different things that he said, different milestones in his life, funny little sayings. I'm not sure what my purpose was in writing it. I just felt this urge to share that and thought, well, maybe one day he'll read this. He literally started reading it a couple days ago.
Wow.
And he's laughing, and he is walked away from the Lord. But when he's reading things and sharing with me how he sees that I have prayed for all of them to know the Lord, or to not at that time abandon their faith, I'm like, whoa. So I'm just saying, if somebody wants to, have a dream of publishing, there's certainly ways to go about it. But if it's merely to write, that has to be okay. It really has to be okay that God chooses how he wants to use that, and what audience. So I
That's
think
terrific.
cut it into smaller little steps of obedience, and he may have a bigger agenda than you imagine. But
that's beautiful, and great that he's picking that up. And it was really your writing over those years that he's reading now. Sometimes just that legacy of writing is a huge piece. So.
Right.
Thanks. Well, would you mind praying that people would be able to keep praying and seeking God on their on whatever gift they have, and they'd have the faith to step out when they feel God calls them to do it.
Yes, I will. Lord, we do thank you for your presence, and we thank you for the fact that you do make us with gifts and talents, that you are the creator, capital C, and that you place within us gifts and callings. And Lord, I pray for those who feel maybe very strongly that you've called them to something and they're hesitant. I pray against the spirit of fear. I pray that they will seek organizations, or seek a friend, seek whatever it is. Take that first step of faith and to cry out to you to help reassure them that you are there, that you've already gone ahead of them, that you're behind, that you surround them on all sides, that you have a purpose that is beyond what they can ever think or imagine. And there may be some that aren't listening. Maybe you're prompting them to do something creative, or that they just really haven't been tuned into. So I pray that you would sharpen their hearts and minds to inquire and to dialogue with you about that, to be maybe still and quiet, and just to be reassured that there's plenty of resources, sometimes more than we'll ever really get around to, and just pray that you would guide and direct their steps. I just thank you for Eric. I thank you for what he has done, just his very authentic passion to help those of us who have things that we want to do, to create, and to get out into the world, ultimately so that the world will know the Lord and know Jesus and his love, your love for us. And so I just thank you for this time and for the gift of technology and just for his ability to know how to work it and to reach people, to not be hindered by the fact that we can't physically sit around in a circle, but we can be together through these means. And so I just pray blessing on him and this podcast and this year. And we just thank you for who you are in Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. This has been great. I was going to read one quote from your book. There's so many that I could read and I would love to read, but I love that you had this angry argument there and on the phone, and the guy slams down his phone and it says slam. Now there's one benefit to a landline. I love that. You can't really do that with a cell phone anymore and slam it down, but yeah, the old
Well,
you
yeah,
could do that.
it's tempting to throw the phone across the room, but yeah.
This was a beautiful line when she was having some difficulties, your lead character, and she was calling her mom. She said, things on the other side of the rainbow aren't looking so colorful.
Yeah.
Unless one is on meth, which was part of the context. But I think it's a nice way of saying, wow, just things don't always turn out the way that you want, or they're not looking the same as she had planned. You trust the Lord's plans.
Mm-hmm.
This was a nice motivator. I liked this. You have, what's the motivation behind your thoughts? And this one guy was very orderly, and he states emphatically, I like order. Mm. And the other guy says, correction, you like control. Mm. Excessive, period, and never want to fail or look like a fool. Right. I think you got at some deep matters of the heart. There's so many quotes that I love because you capture things that are on people's minds and hearts and little ways of saying things. I love it. Mary, thanks for being here today. Thanks for being my friend. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. We're so thankful for having had the chance to meet you years ago and just still have the connection. You're a huge blessing to us.